Good morning. I am Joni Robbins, and I am the Purchasing Director at the North Carolina Department of Transportation. As Carla said, we will go through the training. There is a opportunity to ask questions after each module, and Carla will help me with that. So we'll go ahead and get started. So this morning, we are going to talk about purchasing for the state of North Carolina. We're going to talk about some rules, registering with the state, the EVP, electronic vendor portal. We're also going to talk about some purchasing methods, seeking competition, solicitation methods, evaluation methods, and we will talk about the award process as well as contract monitoring. What we are also going to cover is that the difference between what are rules and what are laws pertaining to purchasing for the state. We're going to consider what is a good versus what's a service. And what does it mean by delegation and what about policy? We're going to talk about both of those things, and we will also talk about the different types of contracts. This screen here is really showing the purchasing hierarchy for the state of North Carolina. So to your left, the North Carolina General Statutes, that is legislation that is done by elected officials, and those are the laws for the state of North Carolina with regard to purchasing. And the middle top is the Purchase and Contract Administrative Code, which are really the rules that we follow to enact the laws. And when I say we, I mean different agencies and university and community colleges across the state of North Carolina. And then the procurement manual is the policy. It really identifies the course of actions that the agencies and the other entities will use in following the rules, how they're going to do that. And at the bottom there is the agency purchasing manual. So the North Carolina procurement manual is really established and maintained by the Department of Administration Purchasing Contracts Division. And that's the overall document for all of the state entities. But each entity has its own purchasing manual, which cannot contradict the North Carolina procurement manual. And so NCDOT, just like other agencies, have our own purchasing manual. And in that, it really gives the specifics of how the agency will follow the policies and the laws with regard to purchasing for the state. I also list the OSBM budget manual because that also offers some guidance to the state agencies and the universities regarding, allowable expenses and reimbursement processes. This screen is talking about the authority for purchasing. To your left, there's purchasing contracts. That's the that's located in the Department of Administration, and they have the overarching responsibility for providing approvals and award recommendation reviews, and they also manage the state term contracts, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But they do that for all the entities that for purchases of goods and services that are non-IT. So purchasing contract, the division of purchasing contract covers all General Statute 143 for non-IT items. Again, that's goods and services, and their authority is really in the general statutes, the laws of Chapter 143 in Article 3. You will find that there. The administrative code is there also, and remember that's the rules around how we're going to enact the laws that are put there. But you can find that in Title 1 in Chapter 5. For IT purchases, we have a statewide IT office which serves the same purpose as the Division of Purchase and Contracts. They just do it for IT. So any purchase of goods and service over the state entity's delegation must be reviewed and approved prior to award by If it's non-IT, that would be the Division of Purchase and Contracts. If it's IT, that would be the statewide IT procurement office. And again, for IT purchases, the laws, the general statutes, the laws are found there in Chapter 147. There's also administrative code that pertains just to IT, and you can see that in Title 9, Chapter 6. Also listed the state construction because that's a little different than purchasing goods and services, whether they're IT or not. And of course, construction that pertains to renovation or alterations of any physical properties belonging to the state. And the information and the authority for that can be found in the general statutes on the chapters 116, 143, and 153. And they also have a state construction manual that talks around their processes and procedures that they use in order to carry out the procurement processes. That just really highlights each one. So then we want to talk about who are our potential customers and what opportunities are there to work with the state. So there are really a lot. You see there, we have 28 executive state agencies. We have 58 community colleges, 16 public universities, over 2,500 public and charter schools, 100 counties, and more than 500 municipalities. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for you to provide good and/or service to the state. This screen really just the list of the state agencies and the support organizations for the state. What I like to point out is that if you look at that second column that talks about the type of agency, the ones that are indicated by cabinet, those are agencies who the head of the agency is appointed by the governor. And if it says council, those agencies' heads are elected officials. And then we have our support agencies that are listed there as well. So how is need identified? So need is, in step one, the agency asks these kinds of questions when they're looking at, when we're looking at purchasing, what do we want to buy? How much does it cost? We're also going to look and make sure there's funding there and what's the process we're going to use to buy it. And we're also going to look at what documentation is needed depending upon what process you use. And that may be different. And so when it comes to the purchasing department, so when my team gets it, we are going to be asking the questions about what are you trying to buy and how much does it cost, right? We need to identify whether it's a good or service. We're going to take a look at the delegations. Is it something that is under the agency delegation and therefore we can handle it completely in-house? Or if it's over our delegation and we would need to get one of the overarching agencies to review it prior to award. We're also going to look at whether it's a mandated resource or whether we're going to buy it in a competitive process on the open market. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those two things are, mandated resources and the open market, in just a moment. So goods versus services. So goods are really all commodities, supplies, materials, anything that is tangible. And for goods, there is a vendor charge of 1.75% on that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well in just a little bit. And some examples are, again, it's equipment, anything that's tangible that you can see, put your hands on, right? Those are just some examples of what goods are. So our services are intangible work or tasks that's performed by the individual or a company that requires, specialized knowledge, experience, and expertise, or a similar capabilities. And an example of that would be so an example of a service is, as you can see there, that looks like a plumber. There's someone who is doing power washing. So those are services, something that's intangible. And so agency delegation is each agency, a community college, university has a set general purchasing amount. The delegation is really talking about an amount of money. which the state purchasing officer, who is the director of the Division of Purchase and Contract, he runs for non-IT. He runs, he pretty much oversees all the purchasing across the state of North Carolina. He approves, he have the ability to raise or decrease that delegation for all of those entities, the agencies, community college, universities. Currently, most agencies enjoy a $50,000 delegation. That means that any non-IT item that is $50,000 or less, then we do not have to seek the Division of Purchasing and Contracts review and approval prior to award. It's something that we can handle strictly in-house. Which is what the second point is. Anything under delegation or processed and executed by the agency. Anything over, again, is approved by the Division of Statewide Purchasing and Contracts, P&C is commonly called, or NDIT is the statewide IT procurement office. This is an example of a purchasing policy. Now, this pertains to NCDOT because that's who I work with. But if you were dealing with another agency, this policy may look slightly different because they make their own with regard to, as long as they stay within the required purchasing manual. So for DOT, anything that's less than $10,000 or less, we consider that to be a micro purchase, whether it's goods or service. And we really encourage our business units in 14 different divisions to use their P card, the procurement card, to make those purchases. So those do not come through my office. My team generally do not help with that. They can ask us and we will provide the service if they ask. But a lot of those small purchases are just done with the credit card, with the P card. If it's $10,001 up to $25,000, we consider that to be a small purchase. And we do require one current informal quote. And then if it's a service, depending upon the service, there are certain services that we require we use the state terms and conditions, which means that we're going to put it on our document so that everyone, the vendor in the state, there's clarity on who's responsible for what and what the requirements are. An example of that is our janitorial contracts. Many of them can be less than $25,000. And so therefore, technically it is a small purchase. But for our janitorial services, we are required to have they can only use certain material for cleaning. They're required to have certain certifications on, like the vacuum cleaners. There's some other requirements in terms of health that are there by law. And so we need to make sure that there's a clear understanding and agreement between the vendor and the state with regard to that. And so those type of services are memorialized through our document. So we would either use an RFQ, which is a request for quote, or we'll use an IFB, which is invitation for bid. So if it's $25,001 up to $50,000, we consider that to be an informal, whether it's goods or services. Competition is required, but we do not have to advertise it. So these will not be posted as bids because we don't have to advertise it. We do require the vendor to agree to our terms and conditions. So therefore, we are going to use our paperwork, which is our solicitation documents. And so we will either use the request for a quote or the IFB, the invitation for bid for this category. For goods, we ask for 3 quotes, and if it's a service and if a contract is required, we could use IFB or RFP. It is not common to use an RFP in that category, but it can be done. For anything that's $50,001 is considered to be a formal purchase, whether it's goods or services, and the vendor has to agree to the terms and conditions. Therefore, we will be using our solicitation documents for that. This is advertised, so this is what's posted on the open market, or there are certain conditions that, if they're met, we are able to not compete it, and it's called a waiver. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little later. But generally, in that 50,001 category, those goods or services will be posted. I'm a firm believer in, actually, the cornerstone for public purchasing is competition. So for my team, I have instigated a rule that for any time that a waiver is wanted to be used, that I have to review it and approve it, regardless of the dollar amount, because I want to make sure that it is in the best interest of the state and our citizens, that we are not using competition for that purchase. The contract terms are standard 3 years. Anything that's contract longer than 3 years, it does require the purchasing contracts division approval. It really requires the state purchasing officer approval. And any contracts that's over $1 million, and we have many of those, must also be reviewed by the legal team. So for NCDOT, I have our legal team, my team has our legal team review it. And also Division of Purchase and Contracts has the legal team as well, and they will review it as well before posting and before awards, to make sure everything is in line. So state term contracts, we talked about, I mentioned earlier about mandated resources. And so a state term contract is considered a mandated resource, which means that we have to use the state term contract if it's considered to be mandatory. So state term contract, the basic definition is that it's a binding agreement between a purchaser and a vendor to buy and sell a good or service at certain prices on the stipulated terms and conditions. The statewide term contract established by, for non-IT, Division of Purchase and Contracts, and is used by all agencies unless they exempted by, there are some statutes out there that does exempt certain agencies from certain state term contracts. The state term contract will be identified. If you go out and look, they will say either it's a mandatory contract or it's a convenience. If it states that it's mandatory, then the state entities have no choice. They are required to use that state term contract if they are purchasing any of the goods and services that's on that contract. If it indicates that it's a convenience, then we can choose to use it, or we can choose to do a competitive process or another purchasing process to procure the goods or service. You can the advantages, we think, for term contracts is that it offers lower pricing, good quality products, and shorter delivery times. There's also what I call agency specific term contracts. And these are generally indefinite quantity contracts, which means that we don't guarantee a vendor that we're going to buy a certain number. We put it in place, and they're agency specific. So a state term contract is for the state, all the entities across the state. So if, for instance, NCDOT, we buy, as you can imagine, what we do to construct and maintain our state roads and highways. We do a lot of purchases that are really just germane to transportation. So other agencies would not need to buy some of the same goods and services that we do procure. And so I could have, and I do have, agency specific term contracts that are just for NCDOT. We put them in place for the convenience of all of our by our end users here at NCDOT. And we do base it on historical data. We kind of look and see how many times and how often do we buy a particular good or service. And if it's pretty frequently, then it generally makes good business sense to put a agency specific term contract in place. We would have identified the vendors. We would have agreed on a price. And most vendors jump at the opportunity to be on the contract. So those are what the different types of term contracts that the state has. So for service contracts, a service contract is an agreement which a vendor or company performs a work or task. Again, it requires that specialized knowledge, that experience, that expertise, or something similar, some similar capabilities for what the state is looking for. Um, if a vendor receive payments for services over $600, then and they must submit the 1099 form. There are really two different types of service contracts. It's either contractual service or it's a consultant services. And what's the difference between the two? So a contractual service is really an independent vendor or worker who performs certain tasks that requires that specialized knowledge that we talked about. There's a couple of examples that are listed there. And a consultant, while we are also looking for specialized knowledge and experience, expertise, and professional qualifications, their job is really to provide counsel, review, and analysis or advice versus actually performing a task. So that the difference between those two is that the consultant really advises, provide guidance, reviews, and counsels the agency for the particular service that they are looking for. And for consultants, that must be those contracts must be approved by the governor's office. But that's a process that is not it's not transparent to you. You won't see that. That's part of the approval process. So when my office put together a consultant contract, they're generally over $50,000. And so for non-IT services that we do the consultants for, they will have to be reviewed by the Division of Purchase and Contracts. And part of the Division of Purchase and Contract approval process is that they will get the approval from the governor's office. And so that would be already in our approval when we get it from the Purchasing Contracts Division. Are there any questions so far?
We do not have questions in the chat that haven't been answered. And so unless someone wants to unmute and ask a question, which will give them an opportunity to right now. If you have a question, you can unmute and ask. And if not, we can move on, Joni.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
So going back to the beginning here, is there anything you recommend just to, in terms of how to get started if you're brand new and all the different steps? Is there recommended course material that we should review? I think this is good to go through this, understand this. I'm really figuring out here, step 1, step 2, step 3, all the different steps to go through.
If I can answer the whole that question, we're going to talk
Sure.
about registering and with the state and registering for the vendor portal, and I think that is more germane to your question. So if you just give me a little bit, we'll get to that. And if you don't hear what you're looking for, please at that time ask your question and I will address it.
Absolutely, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. Are there any other questions?
No more hands raised.
Okay.
Want to proceed?
Thank you, caller. So in this section, we're going to talk about, we're going to switch gears a little bit and move into the process you need to follow if you want to do business with the state. And we will discuss the electronic vendor portal, some basics about that, how to register, and how to manage your account. So those of you who have done business with the state previously and have been kind of part of this process for a while, you know that the Division of Purchase and Contract has very recently gone live with their new vendor portal. And so we are all getting acclimated with using that. And so the basis of it is that it's really a single cloud-based application, which enhance features, and we think that provides greater efficiency, provides a single point of access for North Carolina government organizations. So all the state agencies, universities, and community colleges are there. And remember, for goods only, there is that 1.75% fee for that. The vendor portal, which you would see EVP, and so that stands for the electronic vendor portal. It is free. It's the automated business opportunity notification system that's included there. You are required to keep your information updated, and it's really a one-stop for registration for to receive purchase orders. You can get notifications for solicitation, and it also allows the buyers, the procurement specialists in our different agencies and university community colleges, to be able to do a vendor search particularly when we are in that uh, small and informal range that I talked about earlier. Those are when we're going to request quotes from vendors. Then we are going to search that to look for vendors who are, we take that opportunity to look for our hub vendors, let me say that specifically, and that can provide the good and service that we are looking for. So I do encourage you to please make sure that your information is current, because we use that to try to identify vendors to award contracts to. So the vendor registration portal is pretty, I think, pretty neat. So in order to use it, you need obviously to have internet access. You're going to have to know what your federal ID number is, or your EIN, your employee identification number. And you also would need to have a valid email address. And so I know Carla is going to provide this presentation to you after we're done with this session. And so there is the link. There is a job aid button that's there. If you go to that link that's listed there, there is I think it's an orange button that says open the job aid. And if you click that button, it has step by step with pictures on what you need to do and how you can register in EVP. So, and then if you run into a snag, there's also the help desk information that's there that you can call to get some assistance with that. In managing your account, that's again, there's job aids that are out there listed. If you again go to that link that's there and click on open the job aid, again, you will get step-by-step instructions along with pictures. It provides direction on how to change your I'm sorry, that says password, should be password. I need to correct that. I apologize. It tells you how to update your profile information. You can go there to either add, delete, or edit your contact information. You can update your vendor name if you need to do that. You can add or edit a location as well. So use that link there and you will be able to get the assistance that you need. Again, if you run into a snag, you will use that same help desk information that was on the previous slide. A couple frequently asked questions with regard to purchasing is why, particularly with the goods, why are you being asked to they pay the 1.75% fee? We think that fee offsets the expense of having to, pay for the system, the development, maintenance, ongoing operations via electronic processes. It also allows the state to conduct business electronically, and it enables you to be able to market yourself to the different state entities. And we also think that there is a process and time savings elements to it as well. And how do your company benefit from that? Again, it cost savings, we think, in terms of processing, marketing, and administrative costs for you. We think it increases the order accuracy and the consistency in the process. And it also is a single point of access to all the government entities. And it again, gives you access to the different government markets that are there. Are there any questions in that section?
There are no questions in the chat. However, we do have a couple of hands raised. Lisa Lee, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I recently was down at the county's office and we were going over my accounts, and I have two, one for-profit and one nonprofit. Both are registered vendors with the state. And going into the process here to the vendor portal, we noticed that I have 65 pages of commodity code on one company and 58 pages on the other. So it appears that when you guys switched over to this new system, all the commodity codes of some sort somehow got added to my profile. I've been waiting for an answer as to whether or not I'm to go in and change all the commodity codes, or if this is a glitch that you guys are aware of and you're going to go back and do it and change it back to the original codes that was in there.
Yes. And so, Joni, I'll take this if you don't mind. It sounds like you have been working with our certification staff on it. Have you not?
No, not necessarily. The gentleman that I'm working with is actually part of BDI. And we were going through some other stuff and we happened to run across this and notice it.
Okay. And so if you want to put your email address in the chat, Lisa, we can put you in contact with someone on our staff who can walk closer with you.
Okay, that'd be great. I know he had called over, and he is the person I was working with, BDI. He had called and said that he was going to get that information, but it's been days now. And since we're having this, I just thought I would bring it up, but I would definitely put my name in the chat.
Thank you. And
Hi,
I'm
Carla.
going to go to John. Go ahead, John.
Okay.
I saw your hand.
Yeah. I'm not sure what BDI is. Can you tell me what BDI stands for?
I can, if you hadn't have asked me.
Business development.
It's the business development inclusion department, something like that.
In
the person
Charlotte,
I work close in Charlotte, correct.
Okay. All right. So what you probably need to do is, if it's related to, if they have those codes listed on their site, that might be different than EVP. But if
it's in
on
EVP,
the EVP,
that's what we looked at.
Yeah, I think you probably
is.
need to reach out to the help desk for EVP, and we can put that that email and phone number in the chat down below. I don't think that this is something that the Hub certification staff are going to be able to help you resolve. I think this is an EVP help desk issue.
Correct. And that's who he reached out to. And that's who I was waiting to get the information back for. But yes, since you brought up the EVP, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I would suggest that you reach out directly to them rather than waiting on response through BDI.
Okay, sounds good. I sure will. Thank you.
All right. And we will place that in the chat. Stephanie Washington, you have your hand raised.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm excited to learn more about this process. And so I had a quick question. So when I got all of my certifications, I did it under one company. And so I've made a huge pivot. And so there's like services in that particular company that I don't do. And so do I have to go through this process all over again if I want to use if I want to change like my company name and what we do, or can I just edit what I currently have?
You can edit your information in EVP, and some of your changes may need to be made through the Secretary of State, as far as doing business as or changing your company name. But as far as communicating what services you offer, those can be done through EVP and changing your commodity codes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And I see Sweeping with your hand raised.
Yes, good morning. I had a question about the 1.75% fee to elaborate a little bit more as far as is that required prior to submitting a bid or after it's been awarded?
No,
And Jen-
yeah,
Yes.
thank you for the question. No, it is only for goods, one, and it's only assessed for an awarded contract. So it is not a charge for everyone who submitted a bid. It is only for the awarded vendor that have goods.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it's not assessed for services, and it's not assessed for anyone that submit a bid. It is only for the awarded vendor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I have LaShonda Walker.
Hi, good morning. My question is, I'm kind of feeling like, I don't know if I'm moving a little bit ahead of myself with my company or not. And my question is, for EVP, I'm currently in the process of submitting my hub certification. So am I to have that certification submitted and approved before I register EVP, or is that the right step to take, is what I'm asking?
So you don't have to be hub certified to be an EVP. So you need to, I think, do that. We certainly encourage hub certification. So you can work on both of those simultaneously. That would be great. But you do not have to be hub certified to be in the EVP portal. Um, but we do strongly encourage that because again, in all our awards, we want to award to our qualified hub vendors. So we actually look for that hub certification, particularly in our less than $50,000 range. And we have quite a few. And if you get several of those contracts a year, they really add up. But we are particularly putting efforts in to make sure that we can identify hub certified vendors. So I do strongly encourage you to get the certification, but you do not have to be a hub certified vendor to be in EVP.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
John, did you want to add to that?
Sure, just to clarify a little bit, in order to be hub certified, you have to be an EVP. So you cannot get certified as a hub until you have already registered in EVP. Doing hub can be part of the EVP registration. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do EVP and just say, I'm a vendor who wants to do business with the state. And you can come back later on and say, now I want to be hub certified. And you go through the process electronically online in EVP. You'd say, I want to be certified, then you'd fill out the application and upload all your documents in EVP. But you do not have to be hub to be an EVP. You have to be certified. You have to be registered in EVP in order to be hub certified.
Okay, yeah, because when in the process of me doing my hub certification, there is a step that indicates that I register for EVP, but I was kind of confused if I do that after I was awarded the hub or
no, you have to do that first.
Okay, all right, thank you, John.
And if you've had your question answered, if you would lower your hand, and we're going to take one last question from Lisa Lee.
Hi, this is a question again with both businesses. I have a for-profit and a nonprofit, as I stated. So being hub certified, is it clear to me that this nonprofit cannot be hub certified, just the for-profit?
It is for-profit, yes.
Okay, so thank you.
All right, and so that was our last question. And Joni, if you would proceed.
Thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
So in this section, we're going to talk about mandated resources a little bit and special provisions and just a little bit about hub certification because we got the right folks on the phone, the expertise that we were talking about, who knows about the hub program, the hub certification program. So as I stated earlier, those mandated resources are things that we have to consider. So for my team and any procurement office across the state, before we buy, we first got to look at certain mandated resources. So if what we are buying is offered by any of these um, offices or contracts that's already in place, that you see here on the screen, then we must buy from them. So, like the mandatory state term contract. So if it's a state term contract, if it says mandatory, we must buy from it. Again, it can also say convenience. If it says convenience, then we are not required to buy from it. We can, but we also can do our own competitive process to get the good of service. If it's something that Correction Enterprise offers, we must consider that. I will say that we're all good stewards of our state money, the taxes that our citizens pay. So what we have done is going back to Correction Enterprise, for example. I'm just using them as an example. If we can find that good and or service from someone else at a price that is cheaper, we ask them to meet that price. And also, I will add that we are required to use these services if they can meet our need, meaning if I need my product or my service by a certain date and they cannot provide it by that date, then I'm not required to use them. I do have to go to them and I have to receive a release from them, which is something we do often. And so it's not a problem. We get it same day because they cannot meet our business need or when we need it. And so they release us and we go out to another, we go down another avenue to procure that good and or service. But those are lists of the mandated resources that we currently have for the state. DIT, the Department of Information Technologies, for those purchases, again, they have a statewide procurement office that approves all technology purchases that are over agency delegation. They also have state term contracts for IT software, hardware, IT services in general, and they also manage all IT projects out of that office. So a hub, historically underutilized businesses, that was, you can see that language for that in Executive Order 25 and General Statute 143-128.2. And so we have a hub participation goal of 10%, and that's for both construction spending and goods and services. Our hubs are identified in our e-procurement, our vendor portal. They're designated in that because the agencies, universities, community colleges, we are all, again, going for trying to meet or exceed this 10%. So we do have, our staff are required to look for hub participation in the solicitations that we do. So the certification is a great thing to have because we're looking for you. And also another initiative that we have with regard to hub is that in all our solicitation, we do have added language that encourage the hub vendors to respond to our bid solicitations. We also have projected upcoming opportunities that we provide. And we also notified the hub office of our postings, solicitations. And we also provide a hub plan, meaning, going out 12 months, what do we think as an agency, what we're going to be purchasing, and gives an opportunity to again, try to help locate some hub vendors that can meet those needs. So spoke just briefly then about a hub plan. This is just one example of what one kind of looks like. And again, it has those ranges there and kind of what we look for in terms of this is specific to NCDOT. And so another agency plan may look slightly different than this one. Are there any questions in that section?
There was a question earlier in the chat about how one would know about small and micro purchases. And then here's a piggyback on that question. And the question is on the small and informal purchase contracts. Are you saying that vendors would have to wait for a procurement specialist to reach out before they are aware of any purchasing need? And if yes, is there a way a vendor can know about the purchasing need prior to a specialist reaching out to them? And so, Joni, if you would talk a little about how vendors can access purchasing needs that are in that micro and small purchase arena.
So thank you, caller, and thank you for the question. What I would suggest is that you identify that commodity code or that area in which you are willing and able to provide that good and or service to the state, right? So let me take this opportunity to say my plug about, when you identify your commodity code, please don't check every box there because it is unlikely that you can provide every service or good that's on that list. It's an exhausting list. And so what happens is when my team or any agency team goes out and for those small dollar or informal categories, purchases that we're doing. So this is an opportunity for us to really focus on hub vendors. So we are going in and doing a vendor search. We're looking for hub vendors. When we pull up your company name, right, we check your box and pull up your information and we see that you have every box checked, then that doesn't help us to identify what you can do, right? So I'm just going to be honest with you. We probably are going to just go to the next vendor because it doesn't answer our question. It's unlikely that you can do everything that's there. So please make sure you are very intentional about the commodity codes that you select, right? So there isn't a formal process in which there's prior notice to what a need is with regard to that. So again, one way is to make sure you're hub certified and you're identified in our system as that because we are looking, my staff is required. I require them to look for and identify. So if you are hub certified and you are in the vendor portal, then we're looking at you. We're looking at the goods and service that you have identified that you are willing and able to provide to the state. There isn't, yes. So for those categories, you would need the procurement specialist will contact you. So make sure your contact information is always current because they're going to call you and or email you because again, these procurements are not required to be advertised, so they would not be posted. And so we're going to use the email system. What we do is complete our solicitation document. It's going to either be a RFQ, a request for a quote, or IFB, an invitation for a bid. We're going to complete it, call you, email it to you, ask you to complete it, and return it to us by a certain time. Please make sure that you are reading the document, understand what it's saying, that you sign it. Sign it. That's very important. If it's not signed, it's not an offer for us. It's not a legal offer that we can do anything with. So make sure you sign it and get it back to the procurement specialist in the time frame that they ask for. If you have any questions on all of our solicitations, whether they are informal or ones that we email or the ones that are posted, all of them have the name and contact information of the procurement specialist that's managing that particular procurement. Please call them. I will say this is it's important in any purchasing, but for those that are advertised, those that are posted, you will see in the document that there is a question and answer period. Make sure that you, when you are reviewing the solicitation, make note of what that date and time is, because that is the last day and time that we are going to address questions, right? When it's the informal process, meaning it's not posted, we're going to email you. You're welcome to pick up the phone and call them, right? Or email them your question, and they will provide you with a response. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we do the question and answers in return with regard to solicitations that are posted. So I hope I answered your question. So there isn't a place that you can see informal requests that we have out there. The best way to do that is to be certified and be identified as a hub vendor in the vendor portal, because my staff is required to look for that information. So, and they will, and yes, they will contact you either by phone first, or they may just email you. So make sure you stay on top of your communications, right? Because they would need to be able to get a response from you within the time period that they indicate, because, you know, we are fulfilling a need for an end user, so they need that good, you know, service by a certain time. So we also are required to have our procurements completed within a reasonable period of time.
And what I'll add to that is that what Joni has shared may be more specific to DOT. And
Yes.
so each agency will may handle it in a different way. One of the most important things you can do is to maintain communication and contact and building relationships with the agencies that you want to do business with.
And thank you, Carla, for that. I will also add that and ask Carla if you would include Nicole's contact information in the information that you sent out to our participants today. And so Nicole Jeremy is on my staff, and she is our vendor liaison. And so she is and this is just for NCDOT, but a lot of our other agencies are also have a Nicole on their staff. And so we need to, you know, identify who that person is for the different agencies. But for NCDOT, it is Nicole. And so you can reach out to Nicole. That's a direct person that you can reach out to. She's gonna let you know what we have. She also can put you in contact with the specific purchasing specialists that are working on the areas in which you are willing and able to provide service and are good to the state. So Nicole is a great point of contact for NCDOT, and to particularly for those areas that those goods and services that are not advertised. So that's another way of getting the information, is to stay in regular contact with Nicole. And she can also, we are willing to have meetings. So you get with Nicole, ask to come in. You know, we will pull together the procurement specialists that are buying that are procuring the good and or service that you have a particular interest in. We are willing to do that. We are very serious about our intentions to contract with hub vendors, but we need you to respond to requests, and we need to know who you are and what you can provide.
We have Michelle with her hand raised.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to know, I mean, I'm already HUD certified. I've done all the paperwork, got all the documents in place for all the vendor porters and all of that. But when I go in and look at some of the contracts that come in, or the bids that come in, or the offers that come in, it's so overwhelming with the paperwork. So I was wondering if there's somebody that could sit down with me and help me to fill out, like if I see something that I want to try to put a bid in on. If there's someone or a place I can go that can sit down with me and help me go through that paperwork, because I mean, it's tons of paperwork to go through. I mean, lots of sheets and stuff, and to not have ever done it is a little overwhelming. So I was just wondering if there was someone that could help to walk me through that first process at least.
So that's a great question, and thank you for asking. So I would say this: we do offer at NCDOT, and the other agencies are doing similar outreach kinds of activities. So we do a lunch and learn, which is, excuse me, obviously done during the lunchtime. We also do what we call tips and tools, and that's done in the evening. If you reach out to Nicole, she can let you know when we're having the next ones and, the date and times for those. And in those, particularly the tips and tools in the evening, we do walk through solicitation documents and what the key things that you need to pay particular attention to, and answer any question you may have about what does this section means, and what information you should provide in what section, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, what we cannot do is once a bid is posted, we cannot help you fill it out. So at that point, once it's posted, we are not going to be able to walk through it and tell you what you need to put in it, because at that point, it's either competitive in one sense, whether it's posted or not, because we are getting 3 quotes at a minimum. One if it's really micro, but 3 in most cases. And so we want to be fair to all the vendors, so we can't help you fill it out. What I would suggest is that you get in touch with Nicole. What we will do is a one-on-one session with you to go through a solicitation document to help you, so that when the next opportunity comes up, right, you have your questions answered, what sections you need to pay attention to, and what information you need to provide. So we will willingly do that if you reach out to Nicole, and we'll set up some time to get that done. Now, Nicole would not necessarily be the person who will provide that training, because Nicole really helps us manage our vendor relationships. But one of either someone on my staff that does the actual procurement piece of it will walk you through that process. Absolutely, we would do that.
Great. We have a question by Erwin Bond. Thank you for your patience, Erwin. Can unmute and ask if you still have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. How's everyone doing today?
Wonderful.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I
Welcome.
just
Good
had
morning.
a question of if you said that don't check multiple boxes. What if you have a state license in multiple trades? Like I got commercial heating and air and residential, unlimited electrical, refrigeration contractor, and I'm about to get my GC license. So it'd be kind of unfair for me not to check every box when I can show up to a job. My company can show up to a job, and if it's like a GC job, we can do the whole job. We're qualified for it.
Okay. Thank you, Irvin, for that question. So I apologize if I wasn't clear. I wasn't saying just check one. I was saying please only check the ones that you truly can provide the service for, right? So if there's, I don't know how many is there. Let's just say there's 200. If you check 200 boxes, it is unlikely you can do all 200 of those things. Certainly, for every box that is a clear definition of what the service and or good that you can provide to the state, please check it. We want to know that. But some people think that is, they have thought that, they want to see every solicitation that comes out. With it's going to be a lot of that, and your email is going to be inundated with a lot of information. And if you're only offering one good and or service, then the other 99 that you can get every day is going to overwhelm you. So, but Irvin, yes, please check every box that is it is a good and or service that you can provide. Yes.
And Joni, if I can jump in, this is
Sure.
John with the Hub office again. Particularly on the construction side of things, when you've got a license, that's a little bit different. What Joni was mostly referring to was the commodity codes, the UNSPSC codes. There are thousands of those codes. And the construction codes, there are probably a couple hundred of those because we use the CSI construction codes for that. But there is a way to indicate that you have a particular license for specific trades. And I don't think that's what she's talking about, of limit that. You know, if
Right.
you have that license, go ahead and include it. That's important. There are times where people are only allowed to reach out to people who are licensed for a particular trade, specifically architects and engineers. So that is important to make sure that you indicate.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you,
for the
John.
clarification.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for clarity, John.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Irvin. Mhm.
And so our last question is going to come from Lisa Lee. And I am seeing Erwin and Stephanie with your hand raised. If you would lower your hand if you got your question answered. And then Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, thank you again. So if I could get some clarification on receiving the emails from per se hub vendor, or knowing how it's a hub email communication, or if it's just a regular vendor communication, i.e. I received a vendor procurement yesterday and it just stated, vendor procurement coming from the state of North Carolina opportunity. So I'm assuming there's two different variations of this. One just coming from the procurement of the state, and then one coming from Hub.
All of the emails that we send out from the Hub office will go to the same email address that you have registered in EVP. So you will get a mix of emails that you should be aware of, what those emails are for.
Okay,
yes.
so I guess just to kind of specificize my question again a little tighter. So if it's coming from per se your office, it is going to say Hub, correct? Like
That's
the
correct.
hub procurement. Okay.
It's going to have the Hub office email address, and that it's going to be labeled Hub. Correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So you will also, I would add, Carla, that you will also, if you signed up in EVP, right? And for those opportunities that are for the commodity codes that you signed up for, then you will receive a notification from EVP that there's an opportunity out there pertaining to those commodity codes that you signed up for, right? So that's another email that you may get. You also may get from NCDOT or any other agency if we are, again, in that less than $50,000 range, and where we are going to email you the solicitation document or the opportunity, then you will get an email that will generally, it has, like, my email address is jsrobbins2@ncdot.gov, right? So it'll say at maybe DOA, NCDOA, or something like that. So I think that if you can look for different emails from different sets, because they're be coming from different groups for different reasons. Well, one is a notification, so you know of an opportunity. One is communications from the, say the Hub office on an event or an opportunity that they want to make sure you are aware of, for information sharing or training abilities. And then you also may get an email from the different agencies or community colleges or universities if they are, sending out communications for an opportunity that they have that's particular to their agency. So I think, if you open it up, hopefully the first couple sentences will make it clear around who it's from and what it's about. And hopefully the subject matter also will help with that. So.
All right, that took care of our questions, Joni. We can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So in this section, we're going to talk about the different types of solicitation documents. We're going to talk about the content within those documents, and then a little bit about the requirements versus the evaluation criteria. So when we are doing solicitation planning, what we ask from our end user is, right, they have to identify what they need, and define what it is, because we're not the subject matter expert. What my team is good at is procurement, right? So we actually know and understand the laws and the the codes that are in place for the state of North Carolina, and make sure that we follow those. But we're not the subject matter experts, so we need our end users, the people who are going to actually get the good in our service, to help us understand what their need is and define that for us. Provide information with that, if there are any specifications or scope of work that needs to go with that, then they need to provide help us to draft that information. And what we are going to do is review and authorize the process, the different steps in the process. We are also going to prepare the solicitation. So the end user do not actually do the document. My team would do it using the information from the end user. So, and then with the vendor direct quotes, it's a tool that is used for goods and services for purchases up to like $25,000. The buyer or the procurement specialist is able to select from a list of registered vendors. That's why it's really important to make sure your information is kept current. And the IRQ process, the informal request quote, that is for goods or services. These are for purchases up to $50,000. We're able to add some language and specification there if needed. Again, the purchaser or the buyer has the ability to select from a list of registered vendors with that regard to that. This is going to be sent directly to the vendor, to you, and you are required to agree to the terms and conditions for the state. In the RFQ, the request for quote, it is a solicitation document that's normally used for non-advertised procurement. We talked a little bit about that. So if we're not going to post it, that's what they need by non-advertised. If it's advertised, that means it's posted. Again, it's sent directly to the vendor via email. The vendors, reason why it's on this document is because we need you to agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. It can be used for seeking competition, and it also is used when we are not seeking formal competition. It says that the response could be sent via fax or email. I will tell you 99.9% of the time it's going to be email. Unlike the advertised solicitations, these RFQs, they're open once we get it back from you. So we send you a RFQ, you complete it, sign it, send it back to us. We are going to open it, review it immediately that we get it from you, right? We'll talk a little bit late in a minute or two about the advertised solicitations are only opened at the day and time that it is indicated on the document. So the IFB, the invitation for bid, is really used for a more formal process, and that's when we're seeking goods and or services that for the goods, they're well defined. We know exactly what we're looking for. The services are really simple, they're not complicated. Generally, it's over $50,000 when we use it. This is where the bids will be evaluated, and the award in most cases is going to be to the lowest responsive bid that meets the specification and requirements. There is a mandatory 10-day minimum that it has to be posted or advertised out on the site. And these are public bid openings, and they could have a site visit. We'll talk about what a site visit is in just a couple of moments, but it is a public bid opening, right? Which means that you could come and watch us open the bid if you want to. Um, but we also offer the opportunity that you can just email the purchaser. Again, their name, contact information is on each of the solicitation documents. So you could email them and ask them to send you a list of all the vendors that submitted a bid response. And you also, in some cases, can ask to have what was the amount of the submitted bid, right? If it's a bid in which we think that we're gonna have to negotiate, then we will not provide the pricing information. But if it's a simple low cost meet spec solicitation, then we will provide you with not only the name, but the submitted bid price for that particular procurement. So our RFP, request for proposal, that these are more complex services and is generally a combination of goods and services, and is estimated over $50,000. In most cases, is well over $50,000. Again, these are for more complex services. This is when the state kind of know the end result, but we are seeking a vendor to propose to us the best way to do it. So we're looking for a solution when we do a RFP. The evaluation method can be, in 99.9% of the time, is other than lower cost meet spec. So this is where you're going to actually have an evaluation, and we will tell you specifically in the RFP document what we will be evaluating and how that information will be used. Again, this is a public bid opening opportunity, and it may also have a site visit connected with it as well. The RFI, the request for information, is really just that. It is just a request for information. We're trying to gather some data to ascertain, to make sure what's our level of interest, or what's your level of interest in terms of the vendor community out there in what we are looking at. It is not a solicitation document. No award will result from it. There are no state terms and conditions attached to it. It's generally 3 pages, maybe 4, but it's really a small document. We're going to ask you to provide us with information after the response period is canceled in IPS or in the procurement posting. So the different types of solicitation documents, but they all generally have these different sections in them. And so in section 1.5, that's where you will see why the agency needs this purchase. So there is a 1.0, and it says purpose and background. And in that section, my team in the agency, university, community that use this document is required to provide why we are making this purchase. And in our case, we generally also indicate which business unit or division that we are procuring this good and or service for. In section 2.0, that's just general information. That's where you will see the solicitation schedule. You will also, can you still see my screen?
It just,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So in the general information section, that's where you will see the solicitation schedule. Is going to talk about a question period there. It's going to that's where the contents that's included with the bid is going to be there. The bid submitter information, the number of paper originals that's required, or whether we want digital copies. And that's information is covered in the general information. Typically, we will tell you whether we want more than one copy sent with your bid submission. We will also indicate to you whether we want it to be redacted, any of the copies to be redacted. And we use the redacted process for any information that a vendor may require to be held confidential. And I will say that we are required to we will send you, if you send us a bid submission, the number of copies, so we may ask for a redacted copy. So if you send a bid response and you indicate on any of the information you provide for us that is confidential, and so what that means is if someone, after the bid is awarded, if they ask us for a public record request through the public record request for a copy of your submission, if you have indicated that certain sections of it is confidential, we are not allowed to provide the confidential information in a public request. So we won't send that information. So once we get your response and you indicate that something is confidential, we are going to send you what we call a clarification letter. And that is going to simply ask you to reaffirm that this information is confidential, is deemed to be confidential by you. We are going to inform you that we would not, if you say yes, that the information is confidential, that we will not give the information out. However, if the state is challenged in court for that confidential information, then it would be you, the vendor, who is responsible for defending that confidential information. The state is not going to defend that for you. So we just want to be clear about that. What happens with confidential information. And so, but the number of paper originals, and if the information needs to, if it's have to be redacted because you got confidential information, that information would be there as well. In section 3.0 is the method of award, the bid evaluation process. That's where we're going to tell you how we're going to award it, whether it's going to be a best value evaluation process, or whether it's going to be low cost meeting specification and requirements evaluation. If there's any confidentiality requirements there, it's going to be there. We're going to also list in this section what the evaluation, if it's a best value, we're going to list the evaluation process that we're going to use to make an award from. And section 4 is talking about that. That is just where you get a lot of information, the requirements. We're going to talk about the contract terms are there, what the pricing, inventory, I'm sorry, invoicing, if there's any warranty requirements, if we want references, we have that there as well. If we're going to do background checks, the information is going to be there as well. If there's any certifications or licenses required for this work, then that information would be in that section as well. And 5.0, this is where we're going to talk about the scope of work. Really, what are the objectives? What are the specifications? Are there any deviations that are allowed? That information is going to be there. If there's any type of certification for safety, that information is there. As well as the technical approach in project organization. In section 6, that's where we talk about the contract administration. That's where we're going to provide you with our project manager information. If there's any required reports, these are generally for our bigger purchases. If there is a dispute, how we want to have it resolved, and what's the process for any contract changes, that information is going to be there. And of course, if the product is recalled, what the requirements for the state are for that. And then lastly, there is an attachment section, and that's where you will see the terms and conditions. We're going to ask you to talk to us about or sign. It's really a simple form. The location of workers. Also, the financial condition of your company is this. It sounds like it's complicated, but it's a one-page form that you're really going to check there are a couple boxes there. You can check one and sign it. We'll also have hub information, supplemental information in there. And if we need to provide any additional like maps or diagrams, sometimes we also will have our pricing form in the attachments as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about documents of change. So an addendum, so when we post a bid out on the vendor portal, right? We're going to post it on a certain day. It'll indicate to you what day we're going to open it, right? What day you have to have all of your responses back in, not just the day, but the time. Please pay particular attention to the time. That is the one thing that will not be waived, right? If it's not in on time, not just the day, but by the time that is indicated, then we will not open your bid. Um, Bids are also can, be delivered, hand delivered to DOT. Um, our reception downstairs, they have a date and time stamp. I have one in my office as well. And so if you bring your bid, physically bring it we will time, date, and stamp it, and put a little, it gives us a slip of paper that comes and we peel it off and attach it to your sealed bid. And so once the solicitation is posted, the only way that we can change any information that's in that or add in information to that posting is through a process that's called an addendum. It's another sheet of paper, it's generally 1 or 2 pages. And that's where we're going to post it and tell you about any changes that's been made to information or any additional information provided to the posted solicitation. So it's important that when you get a notification and you decide that you are going to submit a bid response to a particular solicitation, please make sure you are going back on a regular basis to check to see if there's been an addendum that's been added, because there's information in that addendum that you need to know, okay, that will help you perhaps in your bid response. We also have and I kind of mentioned this before, a request for clarification. That is a piece of, that's a document that we use once the bid has been opened. So once we have passed the open date and time, if we have any questions, then we're going to send you what we call a request for clarification. They're generally, again, 1 page. And it's really simple. We're going to ask you to confirm something. We're going to ask you to clarify something for us. It is not a opportunity for you to change anything in your bid. So you can't amend your bid by responding to a clarification. Then we also have what we call a best and final offer, a BAFO. This is used generally in our larger solicitations, and it's sent to a vendor. That's after we've gone into negotiations, right? And typically what happens is, let's say if we had 5 vendors responding, and we deemed that all 5 offers were viable, and we wanted to negotiate with the 5 vendors, then we are going to set up separate meetings with each of the vendors to talk about any questions or needed changes or additional information that we may need in order to help us choose the final awardee, right? And so it's generally, but now that everything is virtual, so I imagine we haven't had one virtual. Previous to COVID, we will have you come here and we'll have a conference room and we'll bring you in and we'll ask questions, and after we have that meeting, you will receive from my office a baffle, and it's generally, again, it's probably 3 to 4 pages. Nothing, it's not the thickness of a solicitation document. It's really going to be germane to the conversation that we had with you. We're going to ask you to confirm the information that we agreed upon in our negotiation meeting. And we're going to ask you to sign that and send it back. That baffle becomes a part of the solicitation document, and it also becomes part of the contractual agreement between the vendor and the state. And we also have the amendment document. That's for any changes made to a contract after it has been awarded. And it is something that the state must, and the vendor must mutually agree on and sign. So what I would ask that you do when you're submitting the bid, that you pay particular attention to certain language that's in there. Read the entire solicitation, and I know it's a lot. But what I can tell you after doing this for many years is that a lot of the documents are very, if you, the information in each section is pretty germane. And so, but pay attention to words like shall, must, and mandatory, because that puts an obligation on the state as well as yourself. So pay particular attention to the words that are used. The signature, you're signing saying you understand and you agree. So again, there's that picture there with a little blue arrow. That's where you assign that little box is on the at the beginning of the solicitation document that you would sign when you're submitting your bid. Please make sure you sign it. If you receive a bid that's not signed, I only know of one case, and these are for the request for proposals and the RFPs. And again, those are the more complex services, goods and services that we do. These are generally really high dollar contracts. In those RFPs, there is a section that requires the submitter to provide a letter that indicates, certain information about your company, your willingness to do the work, and, just general abilities, right? And in that, that letter is typically on letterhead and is signed. Our legal team has deemed that that signed letter is an indication of a formal offer, right? In our other documents, IFB, RFQ, that document, that signed document, that letter is not required, so we don't have it. So if you don't sign this box, then we don't have a legal offer and we can't do anything with it. So please make sure you do that. This is a copy of or picture of this solicitation schedule that's in every solicitation document, other than probably a RFQ, request for quote. Because remember, we use RFQ for those informal, those small dollar. We're gonna mail that strictly straight to you, and so you won't have the schedule because it's the RFQ is not going to have a lot of these formal steps in it, right? We're going to email it to you. You fill it out. You email it back to us. We're going to open it immediately. We're going to go ahead and process that fairly quickly. These are for the posted, advertised bids. The issue solicitation, that's the state's responsibility. We're going to generally put the date that we posted there. If there's a pre-bid meeting or site visit, if that's required, the date and time for that is there as well. Submit written questions. That is the date and time that our written questions have to be in. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Provide responses to questions. That particular line may or may not be there. That's not a required information to give, but really that's the intent of the purchaser to have questions back. So, well, we'll talk about questions in a minute, I say. And then submit bids. That's the date and time that we must have your response in our office. So please, date and time. Pay particular attention to that line. Submit bids. That's important. Some will also tell you the date that we intend to award the contract. And also, it may also have the contract effective date listed as well. Let's talk a little bit about vendor questions. So first thing I would say is that you really as I stated, on each solicitation document, the name and contact information for the procurement specialist that's handling that procurement is listed there. You may only contact that person with questions regarding that particular solicitation, right? That's very important. You have to submit your questions in writing. And that little box that's there, that's really a virtual picture of what what's in the actual solicitation document. questions answered by phone or in person, and we'll talk about site visits in a minute, but they are not binding, right? So you can call. I've encouraged my team not to answer questions from people calling about a advertised bid. Now you can call about something else, and certainly we're going to help you. I'll be honest, depending upon the question, they may go ahead and answer it. But what you need to know as a vendor, that regardless of what they say, it is not binding on the state unless you submit your question in writing. Because what we do is we say, for instance, we had a bid posted and today at 2:00 is the deadline. So July 19th at 2 p.m. would be on, I'm gonna go back one. So where it says submit written questions and says vendor, date and time, it will say July 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or EST, right? That would be on that line. So when we, sorry, going the wrong way. So when we get that, so today at 2 p.m., what I'm gonna do is you may have sent me your question last week. You may have sent it yesterday. You may have sent it at 1:30 today. I'm going to take all of them, regardless of we get them, unless I get it by 2:00. When I get it at 2:01, right, I'm going to take all the questions I receive. I'm going to put it on a table. And then depending upon the question, some questions are procurement related. My staff, will answer those. It has two columns. One column is the questions, another column is the answers. For those questions that are procurement related, my staff will place the answer in the beside that question in the answer column. If it's specific to the if it's subject matter question, then we're going to send the question to the end user. They will provide us with a response. We will put their response on that table, and then we're going to use that addendum. Remember, I told you once something is posted on time, we can add the way to add information, change anything is to post an addendum. Then we're going to post an addendum that has that table on it with all questions and all answers, right? All questions, all answers. So everyone is getting all the questions and all the answers at the same time. And that addendum, remember, is a part of the solicitation document, what makes it part of the contract, what makes it binding on the state. So it's very, very important that you understand that for advertised bids, if you have a question and you want the state to be held liable for their response, provide your question in writing by the deadline, the date and time for the written question specific to that solicitation. All questions that are submitted will be answered and posted to IPS, what I just said, in an addendum. So we'll talk, mention site visits. So sometimes we are soliciting for goods and or services, mostly services, but it could be a good, and which is necessary for the vendor to actually physically see the location, so you can get some information for yourself. These site visits, and this information is in the solicitation document. One, if a site visit is going to be offered, it will be listed in the solicitation document. So site visit can be one or two. It could be labeled as mandatory. If it's mandatory, it would obviously give you the specific date and time and location where it would be. We're going to have a sign-in sheet there. We're going to ask you to sign in and sign out. Because it's mandatory, that means that if you do not attend the site visit, we will not review or accept your offer. We can't do anything with it. You can send it, but we're not going to open it, right? Late vendors, the offer would not be accepted, and we're not going to, because once we start the site visit, we're going to take the time, the sign-in sheet up, right? Offers from late vendors would not be accepted. So if it's not mandatory and we do still want to do one, we're going to have it identified as urged and cautioned, which means we suggest strongly that you go, but you don't have to. If you choose not to, then you don't have to. We still will accept your bid. Your attendance is not required for urged and cautioned. It is required for mandatory if you want your bid to be reviewed and evaluated in the process. Again, this is also at these meetings, questions are often asked. My staff should be saying to you at these meetings that they will answer your questions or If we're in a particular, for NCDOT, it could be any district or it could be one of our business units. They will also have someone there, and it could be they are holding the actual site visit themselves, conducting it themselves. However, what I want you to remember is, regardless of the question and answers that goes on at these visits, and that is where you get information. And so obviously there are going to be questions. But please remember, it's the same thing is true. If you ask the representative there a question, if you want their response to be held liable by the state, that same question that you just got to answer for, submit it in written form by the date and time for written questions for that solicitation. We will provide you a response. Our response is the one that's legal binding on the state, not what they said at the actual site visit, because that's verbal. It got to be written. Please remember that. Submittal instructions, there are several different ways. Obviously, we're using the EVP tool now, so that's one way. We also accept them by mail. You can drop them off at the agency by the date and time indicated. We also have the NC bid process as well. So there are many different ways that they can be done, but the way that you need to use that information is also in the solicitation document. So pay attention to that. How they want the bid submitted, how they want to receive your response will be indicated in the solicitation document. So please pay particular attention to that and govern yourselves accordingly. So the vendor requirements, this is really talks about what the vendor must meet or submit, what information or specifications with its proposal to be responsive. So some are requirements are just yes or no, and they're not being evaluated, right? It's just yes or no. Some examples, for example, like the vendor must deliver the product within 15 consecutive days. If that is there in the requirement section, and there's also generally right either under it or right beside it is a space for you to indicate how many, when you can deliver the product. If it says it must be delivered within 15 consecutive calendar days, and you indicate that you can do it in 30, then you don't meet the requirement, right? So that's a yes or no. There's no evaluation there. It's either yes or no. If it says that you must submit a copy of your general contractor license and you did not meet that requirement. So pay particular attention to that. If it says you must submit 3 references where you have performed similar work to what we are soliciting for, then please provide those 3 references. This is another section that you should pay a particular attention to the languages there. It could say that we may check your references, or it will say we shall. If it says shall, we are required to check them. If it say may, we may or may not. What I will say is, for instance, if it says that we may check the references, we either going to check everyone's references who submitted a response. So if we got 5 responses, if we decide we're going to check references, we're checking references on all 5, not 2, all 5 or none. So we're going to be consistent in that may section, whether we check them or not check them. If it says shall, we are going to check them. We're going to ask them every reference, the same questions. We're going to document the day and time we called the reference, who we spoke with, and what their response, the question that was asked, and what their response was to the question. If you were asked to provide any type of additional information, whether it's a leaflet, pamphlet, or something that talks about the product or services that you're offering, if that's there, please make sure you provide it. So pay attention to what the requirements are. It'll tell you what we're looking for. So the evaluation criteria is really the how we plan to complete the project evaluation. So some examples of what may be there is we all could be looking at vendor experience, right? Your past relative experience, whether you demonstrated it in the public or private sector, right, with some clients that has a similar or greater size and complexity to what we're looking for, that you've already done this work, we're going to ask you for, we're going to evaluate that. We could look at your staffing. That's generally done with the larger contracts, and not so much with the medium and small ones. Technical approach. How are you going to meet the state's requirements? So we're going to evaluate. We could evaluate that. So the criteria is generally it will tell you what we are going to look at specifically, and it's going to tell you how we're going to evaluate it. Some of them are done by weighted percentages, and some are done in what we call a narrative outline, which means you're going to really write about in clarity form, right, what it is that you are going to do. And we are going to evaluate that. That way, if it's weighted, they'll all add up to 100%, right? So, if we have 4, and one piece that's not here that I will say is cost is always a criteria, right? Cost is always an evaluation criteria. So now for our best values, cost is not the most important. Cost is always important because we are good stewards of our tax dollars, right? So cost is always important, but it may not be the most important thing in the best value, right? We're gonna do some balance in there, but cost may not be the most important thing. It is important, but it may not, and it's not gonna have more than 50%. It's generally less than 40% of every of this section. So if we have 4 there, right, cost would not be 40%, right? It would not. It may even be 20%, right? And some of the other 3 will have higher value, right? It's important, but it's not the most important. In best value. So are there any questions on that section?
We do not have questions in the chat. And it looks like we do have one hand raised, and that is Michael. If you want to unmute, you can ask your question.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good.
You guys doing a wonderful job with the procurement overview. I have a question about the vendors. I think you guys touched on it just a couple of minutes ago. You said that the vendors that you might have used in the past, the reputation that they have, but as a new vendor, say for example in the wholesale distributor business, that I want to distribute steel, and you have worked with someone in the past in getting this material. Would you guys be open to say, hey, okay, you know what, we need $5 million worth of steel, and we worked with this company before, but this is a new company, but they only can do $1 million of business. Do you guys split that up, saying, okay, you know what, we're going to give this new company an opportunity to do a small portion of this job to see if they can continue to, get better, bigger, and do more jobs? And then also, you may know the answer, you may not, is that, for example, in the wholesale distributor business, let's say Guilford County, of course, is doing a real big school renovations building, and they need concrete, for example. Do you guys let the vendors who are bidding for those types of contracts to say, hey, there are 4 or 5 vendors bidding for this concrete contract, or do you just say we have multiple companies bidding? Because what that will tell another vendor is that everybody wants to make money, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, the profit margin. Okay, if I'm bidding against 10 people who are supplying concrete, then of course it's going to be very, very minimum as far as the return. But if there's 2 or 3, well, then I know where to put most of my emphasis.
Okay. So you asked a couple of questions, and thank you for that. So we do have multiple awards on certain contracts, so that is possible. That's a decision that's made really in consultation with our end users, because my office job is just make sure that the procurement process is followed, that the laws and the rules are followed. With regard to business decisions such as that, we lean heavily on our end user. We make suggestions to them, but it's at the end of the day, it's their decision if they want to award to one or multiple vendors. They typically will listen to our suggestion, and we give them for different reasons. So it is possible to have multiple vendors awarded on a contract. With regard to whether we tell vendors how many other vendors are bidding or who responded, we really don't know that information until after the date and time of the deadline to submit. So, but if you call the person, the procurement specialist that is on the identified on the solicitation document, and just ask them how many bids have they received prior to that deadline, there's really no reason why they would not tell you that. But there's not a general communication that goes out. No.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
All right, no more hands raised. We can move on, Joni.
Thank you, Carla.
Welcome.
So in this section, we're going to talk about direct submittals. We're going to talk a little bit about the collaborative process in IPS. Is my screen showing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. So the different ways and options to submit your proposal or bid submission are listed there, but the takeaway I think from this slide for you is to make sure you pay particular attention to that information in the solicitation document, because it will tell you specifically which way that they want to receive their bids, and that's the way you need to submit it, right? But there are different ways to do that, but the bid process, the document will tell you which one. So pay close attention to that. And if you have any questions with regard to that, then you can, I would pick up the phone and call the procurement specialist that's identified on the solicitation document, just to make sure you're clear on how they want those, they'll answer those kinds of questions. Absolutely. In the collaborative space, this is another option for submitting, is the informal quote and price request function that's within the electronic bidding procurement system. We could use this for requisitions to obtain quotes for goods and services. The vendors agreeing to the terms and conditions, and it's typically used for purchases up to $25,000. And there's a link there if you want to go in and just take a look at what that looks like. For posting, this is used for our formal solicitations, which are typically our IFDs or RFPs, as we spoke about earlier. What this allows the state to do is to be able to advertise for our goods and services. We're seeking open and fair competition. And we will tabulate the bid prices once we open the bid. And we also gonna post the award information once the bid has been awarded. This will also allow the vendor, you, to be able to market your goods and services. This is 24/7 business opportunity for you. Again, it's free. And you also can view tabulation and award information there. So bid tabulation is, so once we get a bid in, is for the advertised bids. Once we get the bid in, particularly the low cost meat specification ones, not so much the best value, because again, best value, cost is not the most important factor. But in our sorry, my phone is ringing. In our in our low cost meat specification, it is going to be awarded to the vendor who meets all specification at the lowest price. So price obviously is pretty important. In those cases, we will do a tabulation. So it's really, it depends on how many bids we receive. So it could be one page or it could be a couple of pages, but where we simply will list, and these are not typically negotiation bids. So we will provide the pricing. So we will list basically the pricing form, right? The pricing form, what's up there, what we ask you to provide a price for. We will put that for each vendor and the price that they offered for it. So that's the tabulation. So the information is made available when we're not anticipating negotiation. Within, I think it's 3 or 4 days of the bid opening is our goal. We also, once we've gone through the process, whether it's low cost meat spec, or if it's the best value, meaning this is actually evaluated with the evaluation criteria, once that process have been completed and we have an actual award, we will, in both cases, also post the award information. So this is where you can view and find and view solicitations on EVP. And so this is where all of the solicitations are displayed. But you obviously, you can see that. You don't have to have a login to EVP to actually go out there and just look at that portion of it. But obviously, if you want to respond to it via that system, if that is the way that the responses are being received, you will need to have a login to do that. And that's just a slide there that kind of tells you this: click on the solicitation, and then down at the bottom there, when you click on that, you will see browse solicitations. And when you click on that, then the list will come up. To respond to solicitations, and these are obviously this is for one that is having an electronic response to it, where there will be a button there that responds to solicitation. You will click that to be able to submit your response. View tabulation and awards. This is what we just talked about. This is where the procurement staff member will go in and list the tabulations, and once the process has been completed, they will also list the award information there as well. So this is the NC bids. That's just another way to perhaps receive bid responses, and it obviously has to be registered in the portal to be able to use it. It is you will see a button there that tells you what to click, and you'll be able to upload your proposal. So I think the takeaway from this screen is that you must be registered to be able to use this tool. And so the information is there on that slide. And again, Carla is going to be kind enough to provide you with a copy of this presentation after this session. That's just another screen that tells you, it helps you kind of walk through the different pages of that and tell you, which buttons to click on and what information is there if you click on that button. Same thing with regard to this one. This is talking about, this particular one is talking about if there's any prerequisites that's required in order to submit a bid. It identify it there. There's also a checklist there, but in the corner there's also a clock, countdown clock that tells you how many days are remaining for electronic bid responses that are remaining for you to be able to get your bid in on time. Are there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat, and I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay.
So we can continue on.
Thank you. So in this section, we're going to cover the evaluation process. We're going to talk about bid openings, the evaluation methods. We're going to talk about reference check, Executive Order 50, and clarification is baffled. Kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. And so the bid and proposal opening is really part of the formal bid process, because those are ones that are advertised and posted. And so they have a formal opening process. There's a date and time and location that's specified on the document itself. Again, late bids and proposals are not accepted. We're not going to get into any type of back and forth or confrontation with you about it. If you insist on leaving your bid, we will accept it, but we would not open it. If it's late, we're not going to do anything with it. We do have, as I stated earlier, attendance sheets, and they're used for the site visits. If there's one that goes with the solicitation there. Again, please only contact, it says purchasing agent. We like to call them procurement specialists today. Same thing with regard to their contact information is at the beginning of each solicitation document. So please reach out to that person if you have any questions. And again, the tabulations will be posted. I will remind you that pricing will not be disclosed if we think that we're going to go in negotiations. But if it's a low cost meets spec, we do not anticipate negotiations in those instances, and so we will provide pricing. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So the evaluations methods, there are really 3 different kinds that we use. So low cost meets spec is kind of what lowest cost method is commonly called. That's if you meet all the requirements and you offer the lowest cost, you will be awarded. That's really simple for us. It's just a math thing, right? Pretty standard, well-defined requirements. And so that's used for that, pretty simple. When we do best value, right, we either going to do, as I stated earlier, a weighted method, or we're going to do the narrative method. The weighted one is, again, there's going to be some percentages that's going to be listed there and let you know which, that's when we talked about the technical approach, whether we want vendor experience or references and cost. We're going to say beside each one of that how much weight each one will hold, right? And then in narrative, it allows you to offer the most appropriate product or service to meet the business objectives, but it's done in a narrative, in a written out process around what you're providing. So lowest cost, those are just some animations for that. So our reference checks is used to confirm that the vendor is really that you have provided this good or service to another company of the same size and scope as what we are the state is looking for. And it is if we're looking for that, we have the reference section added to the solicitation document. You'll be able to see that. It can be a may or shall. It could be made a requirement. So please make sure you read your document so you know how it would be used. As I stated earlier, we're going to either call, for the ones that says may, we're going to call every bid submission reference, or we will call none. That's how we do it. It's going to be pretty across the board, and we're going to ask all the same question, all references the same questions. So look for that vendor must or may provide language that's going to be there. For clarifications and baffles, talked a little bit about that a little earlier. These are the documents that we use once the bid has been opened. For the clarifications, we are just really asking for some clarity on something that's unclear to us in your bid submissions. There's usually a yes or no. It's not an opportunity to change your bid. We cannot ask you through this process to provide additional information that was not already submitted. We're just going to clarify some information that was submitted. And again, you can't use this process to alter your proposal. Price cannot be changed at all. And then the best and final offer, again, we use this tool for in our negotiations, procurements that we do. And generally, again, those are the higher dollar ones. It could take place over the phone or email. It could be generally, we like to have a meeting with them because we got several questions. We want to hear any concerns that the vendor may have. And these again are for our larger procurements. In this process, in the best and final offer process, your proposal or your submission can be altered. That's what negotiations is for. So it is allowed in negotiation. We may not negotiate with all vendors, so everyone is encouraged to send in their best offer with their original submission because we may or may not do a negotiations. And then if we do negotiations, that's when you will get the best and final offer document, and we ask that you complete that and send that back. It's pretty simple, though. We've already had the conversation with the vendor, so you should have a real clear understanding of what we're looking for. And so that form should be fairly simple to fill out. And so Executive Order 50 offers a price matching opportunity for North Carolina vendors that are headquartered in North Carolina. You must indicate whether or not you want to participate in this process when you submit your bid. There's a section in the attachments portion of the solicitation in which you will indicate whether you want to do that or not. And this is used for goods only. It is not used for services. And your pricing must be within 5% or $10,000 of the non-resident vendor. So we had a vendor from South Carolina, right, that submitted a bid, and their bid was the winning bid. We will give the North Carolina vendor who indicated that they want the opportunity to price match and that their pricing is within that 5% or $10,000 of the non-North Carolina vendor, the opportunity to meet that price. And if they do meet it, then we will award to the North Carolina vendor. Are there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat. And currently we have no hands raised.
Okay. We'll keep going.
Okay, well, very quickly, I saw a question pop up here.
Okay.
And the question is, do you have any suggestions for anyone who has never submitted a bid before?
Great question. Thank you. So yes, I would suggest that if you see a bid that is similar to a service or good that you would like to offer to state, that once that solicitation has been awarded, I would recommend strongly that you do a public records request and ask for a copy of the winning bid, right? And so they have to provide you, again, remember, if the vendor had indicated certain information confidential, they won't send you, that'll be redacted, blacked out or not included in a response. That's typically in the really high dollar ones. So it's not common, but it does happen. But I would do a public records request and ask to see the winning bid. You actually can ask for all the bids that were submitted. But you just want to make sure you want all that information because it can be a lot. You can ask for the winning award documentation, and you could ask for the recommendation letters. You can ask for that information. It's all public information once the bid has been awarded. So I would ask for that and take a look at how, that vendor submitted, how it was evaluated, what the recommendations were about it. It'll give you some idea, right? It's just some idea. It may or may not be a good way to, base in terms of pricing your bid on, right? Because pricing situations can be changed from one solicitation to another, but it gives you some idea, and it gives you some idea what information they provided, what sections of the document that they provided information in, and how that information was provided. That's one way of seeing that, right? Another thing I would suggest is that you get in contact with Nicole and learn for NCDOT or any of the other agencies or state entities, what assistance do they provide? What support services do they provide for our hub vendors to help you to be able to win contracts? Because we all do different outreach kinds of things. And so you want to know what's being offered so you can take advantage of that.
Another question, who do we contact for a copy of the public records request to see who won bids?
So each agencies may do it a little differently. So I would contact the procurement officer that's listed. They will let you know how you need to submit the public record request. I know for NCDOT, all public record requests need to go through our communications department, and basically you would send them, if you reach out to Nicole, we can give you the email information for submitting public record requests to NCDOT. Again, it could be different for different agencies, but for us, you submit the request through our communications department, and what they do is they would then forward it to me, and I will work with my team to get the requested information, make sure it's clean, meaning that, we don't give out federal ID numbers, we don't give out EIN numbers. So that information, we're going to make sure is redacted on the documents. But you'll get all the other information that you really need, right? And then I will prepare the public record documentation, and then I will send it back to our communications folks, and then they will send it to you. I have worked at another agency in which the request came straight to me as the purchasing manager, and I will handle it. I will send out the information straight from myself. So you need to find out from each agency how they handle that. But a good point of reference would be the procurement director or someone on their staff. They'll tell you how you can request public records documents for that agency.
And then the final question, are you allowed to ask for the maximum amount to bid for the state award?
You may ask. I doubt that you will get a response to that, or you will get an amount, right? Because it's about competition, and we want to encourage that. And so for that reason, we do not like to give that information out. Information, even if we gave you what the budget is, that doesn't necessarily, that says that's the maximum amount that we're willing to spend on it, because that's the amount of money we have available. But you may put in a bid, and the business unit, the agency may determine, just based on a lot of other factors, right, whether or not they want to actually award that or not. So that's probably information that is not going to be helpful to you. I would, again, use the public record request process just to get some idea around the previous bids. You can ask the question around what was the previous award amount for this, for the current contract. Most cases, when we are posting, and we are posting for the next generation of contracts, we already have a contract that is current, and so we're preparing so we have a new one in place when the current one expires. So you can ask, what is the amount for the current contract? Again, just be careful how you use that information, because it may or may not be a good guide to what a winning amount would be for the contract that we're soliciting for.
All right, and so that ends our questions. Joni, you can go ahead with the next module.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So
in this section, we're going to talk about award notifications, a little bit about purchase orders and invoicing. So again, when we go through the procurement process, have an award recommendation and actually approval to award, we are going to notify the vendor. The procurement specialist will send you a notification of the award. We're going to congratulate you. We're going to attach the information in our own internal e-procurement system. We're going to issue a purchase order to you. We're going to post, it says within 3 days, the award information, and it should be posted for at least 30 days. I believe the system is set up to do that. And then once, again, my team manages the procurement process. Once we have awarded it, the procurement team is stepping out of the process, and then you will work directly with the end user that you will be providing the goods and or service to. So on our purchase order, there is, a lot of information, but in this is just kind of a list of things that are there. You're going to get a description of the goods and services that we are purchasing from you. The pricing is going to be there. The expected delivery schedule, the payment terms are going to be there. The terms and conditions will be listed again. And if there's any comments that are intended for the vendor, they will be listed on the purchase order as well. With regard to our invoicing, again, this is just some information on what's included in there. There's an item description or the service that was completed. That's going to be listed there. The purchase order is going to be listed there. The contract number, if it's different, sometimes our purchase order number is our contract number, so the number may be the same. Make sure your remit to address is current in EVP, because that's where the payment is going to be sent. Typically, the state does net 30. There can be a little wiggle room there in some cases, but typically the state pays net 30. In NCDOT, we write checks out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The state now does have the capability for electronic payment. So we don't have to send you a check. We can pay you electronically if you sign up for the service. So that's great news. We were excited about that. Are there any questions?
No questions in the chat. I think we can proceed.
Thank you. Quickly, in this section, we're just going to talk a little bit about contract management, inspection, renewals, protests, and public records requests, which kind of covered a little bit. So a contract kickoff meeting, that's really after we have awarded the contract, then the end user and the vendor will get together and they're going to clarify the terms to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're going to make sure everybody understands what the goals and objectives are. We're going to communicate, make sure we understand what the roles and responsibilities are. And then we're going to make sure that we are clear on the delivery expectations. For inspections and testing, the state will notify if we receive any damaged goods or if there's any type of inaccuracy in the order or if there's a late shipment, we will be reaching out to the vendor with regard to that. If there's a quality acceptance inspection of delivery or any language about installation that's included in the solicitation document, we are not going to pay invoices until that inspection and goods are accepted or that installation is completed. And if it's a installation, we are requiring that you dispose of any waste and debris from the site before we would consider it has been installed and or delivered. For vendor complaints, that's generally, my office is involved, but we really look for the contract administrator or the person, your main point of contact for that contract. After the award, the person at the end user in the business unit, we're going to work with that person and with you as a vendor to work through any any complaints or any concerns that there may be with regard to the contract, whether it's delivery, work inspection, or whatever it is. And if it becomes an issue, then we will be issuing documentation that talks about an opportunity for you to provide cure, right? It's called cure letter. That has some actions and deadlines in it that's real clear on what the expectations are. For renewals, again, I stated earlier that most standard contracts are 3 years. If we want more than that, we have to get prior for non-IT or IT, we have to get prior approval from our oversight agencies with regard to that. Renewals are optional, and we do not have to exercise them. If we are going to renew, we will notify the vendor prior to the expiration of the current contract, and we also will obviously generate a new purchase order for each renewal. An amendment, that document is used to make any changes to a current contract, whether it's a change in the rates, the terms, the scope, the cost, anything. And then my office have to be involved in any contract changes. Or NCDOT or the procurement office or whatever agency you're working with need to be involved with any amendment changes. So vendor protests, and so that's an opportunity for the vendor who was not awarded, who submitted a response and was not awarded on contracts that are formal, right? You have an opportunity, if we do not, in your estimation, do exactly what we said in our document. Remember, we're going to tell you clearly what we're going to evaluate, how we're going to do the evaluation. You can, once we're awarded, you can request a public record request to get the information. If within 30 consecutive calendar days from the date of the contract award, you find that you do not agree that we have followed our own process, you can issue a written request to me or the procurement director of the agency. If it's for an award that's up to $50,000, if it's over $50,000 and it's non-IT, it will go to the state purchasing officer with the division of purchasing and contracts. If it's IT, then it would go to the statewide IT procurement office director, and they will be in contact with the agency to address whatever your concern. It must be in written, right? And you must contain specific reasons and any supporting documentation that you have to support what you disagree with. Public record request, kind of talked about that. You have the opportunity to do that, to submit it for any awarded contracts. You send it to the agency that actually awarded the contract. It could be some redacted information. We talked about that. If it's deemed to be confidential information, you need to, when you send in a public record request, make sure you, in your request, provide as much information about the document that you're requesting, meaning when solicitations are posted, it has a number. Provide that number, the contract name, if you have it, if you have the name of the awarded vendor, if you have who was the procurement specialist who worked on it. It's much information around to help us identify. We award many contracts, and so we have to know which one exactly you're referring to. And then you have to let us know how you want to receive it, right? You want to receive it electronically, and which is what we do mostly today, right? We don't do so much paper, but we do provide it electronically. Note on the pricing information, a current vendor on current or past contracts can be released while contract is out for bid, right? So we can tell you about past contracts or current contracts if you want that information. These are just a list of, again, you're going to get this presentation, so you will see that this is just a list of some resources that can assist you in navigating doing business with the state. Are there any questions? And that completes my presentation. I'm glad to take any questions you may have.
Yes, and Currently, I do not see questions in the chat, but we do offer this time for you to open your mics, raise your hand if you have a question, and we can get those answered.
Absolutely. Would love to.
One question in the chat: are notifications sent out when contracts are not awarded? Why a vendor would not be selected?
So if we do not award a contract, then it's canceled, and we do not. We do, if it's a advertised award solicitation, then we do have to cancel it on the system, so you will be able to see that it was canceled. We do not send out individual notifications to vendors. You can certainly always call the procurement specialist that's listed there and ask for a status of what's happening with that. They'll let you know one or two things, right? Either one or three things. Either it's been awarded, it is still under review, or it's been canceled.
Great. And I see a hand raised here. Ken, if you would unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. good morning.
Good morning.
I do have a question. Any information that we may have missed by either, because I was recording this for future reference, and my recorder has stopped. Is there any way I can get any of this information that was reviewed at a later date?
Absolutely. We are recording it, and we will post the recording on our YouTube channel. That link will be sent out along with the presentation, so you will receive it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Daisha Banner, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you for this, and good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Is more so about, because I am new to the hub certification and the actual process of going through with this. Are there any like mock options or any folks that can review a proposal in advance to kind of walk us through or show us what we're missing or what it looks like for success in these arenas? I know I'm in a kind of a different space, so not even sure if my services do apply, but certainly wanting to know a little bit more about kind of making sure we get it right the first time. Is there any option for that, or are there any services surrounding that for new hub certificate?
So for NCDOT, again, it may be different for different agencies, but I believe we all offer some type of hub support. And so I would encourage you to reach out to the different agencies. But for NCDOT, CALL is also going to provide the name and contact information for our vendor liaison, which is Nicole.
Okay.
And so you can reach out to Nicole. Again, we do lunch and learn sessions, and we also do tips and tools, which is we do lunch and learn obviously around the lunch hour. Tips and tools is a training opportunity that we do in the evenings. And so you can reach out to Nicole, and she'll let you know when the next ones are up. We also are willing to do one-on-ones. If you reach out to Nicole, she'll work with my staff, myself and my staff, to set some time up to, just one-on-one walk through a solicitation document with you. What unfortunately we're not able to do is once the bid is posted, or once we've sent out a solicitation, whether it's RFQ and we emailed it to you, we're not able to walk you through that one because we are soliciting in some sort of competitive process. So, but outside of a current bid solicitation, we're more than happy to walk you through a document and answer any questions that you may have regarding it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.